The Sleepers, Chapter 3, Reality. I kept a dream journal for 3 months before Carl considered the next exercise. Each week we'd start in the living room, surrounded by his paintings, and he'd repeat the Lesson 1 mantra, "Awareness precedes control." I grew to hate that phrase. I was hoping for more, like practice dream sessions or even reading assignments. But no, Carl had his own course curriculum, more akin to a taciturn sensei than a tutor. Entering his home, I would find he'd changed some little detail, expecting me to identify it, like how many stacks of magazines decorated the living room, or which paintings he'd swapped, or the day he finally replaced some broken blinds. As I'd wander around aimlessly, he'd coach me about lucidity. Before you can master lucid dream control, you must first wake up. You have to be aware of the dream to change the dream. Manipulation is an easy second step. I would have done well to join the CIA, or someplace where you needed to catch every detail. Under his tutelage, I practiced cognizant mindfulness, the art of challenging sleep reality. Before every rest back in my home, whether for myself or Ray, I would visualize reality. What made it real? What could I hear? How did the land of the living feel? When I awoke, inevitably unsuccessful at awareness, I completed a post-mortem on the dream state. Some people fill their dream journals with symbolism and stretches for deeper meaning. Mine became an academic review of the abnormality of dreams, a precise documentation of every subtle, illogical manifestation. Carl believed I might train my mind to be alert to the dream state, thus activating self-awareness. I would see the impossibilities and wake up to lucidity. But his patience ran thin. Lounging in his outdated couch, he reached across to impale me with his cane, but coughed a loud hack instead. No lucidity whatsoever? Not even a simple flying dream? It's time to try something else. I'm trying. I want this more than anything else. I could feel the same desperation. We still had no real plan to end SleepFree, but lucid control of Ray, and knowing how to lie about it, had seemed like the perfect place to start. Yet I made no progress, and the clock was ticking. He latched onto my word choice. Anything else except destroying Ray. Don't forget, lucid dreaming is the way you'll change the world. Dream journals aren't cutting it. I'm going to have to teach you the wild method. My eyes popped and I sat up. Sounds exciting. Don't get your hopes up, he grimaced. It's an acronym, and a favorite among my self-taught friends. Wake, induced, lucid, dreaming, wild. Everyone finds their own tricks, but they started from scraps like yourself, or maybe a little better given your aptitude. Anyway, I'll give you a little lesson, and then you try it. Lots of ways to do this, but I want you to try 2 things. First, throughout the day, I want you to count your fingers in up-down order, just on one hand, like so. Carl counted from the pinky to the thumb, and then counted down the reverse order. I showed my ability to count to 5 successfully, and he nodded in sarcastic approval. Good! You know how to count. Now, the more you do this counting exercise, the more likely it will become habit, like challenging reality. Except that should your subconscious carry over this silly tradition into the dream state, you'll find it very difficult to replicate. My friend Charlotte... Stop! You have friends besides us? Yes! He snapped. And she gets even better Christmas presents than you. Well, she did until she passed. I frowned, caught in my rudeness. Death was normal for Carl. Charlotte told me once that whenever she'd count her fingers in dreams, they'd start multiplying like fractals and could never be truly counted. It's a pretty dead giveaway that you're dreaming. Dropping the cane, he held both hands up, back to front, and wiggled all 10 fingers, quickly to give the appearance of many uncountable digits. He laughed over his fingers, the dusty light casting dark shadows over his smile. I could handle adding one more ritual to my routine without breaking, but there was a catch. The wild method works best when you are really tired, he continued. I'm a sleeper. That's easy. Carl cocked his head, knowing sometimes he did ask too much.
Well, he dragged out, not quite. For this method to work well, you need to be really tired. You need to interrupt good sleep. That's when you dream best.
I sighed loud, knowing this next step was going to cost me. One more sacrifice for sleepers.
You'll need to set your alarm 3, maybe 4 hours into the night.
I got so few hours of personal sleep, this sounded impossible, but I listened.
Then, as you lie in bed, to go back to sleep, put everything out of your mind. I mean everything.
That wasn't going to be a problem at such an hour. Carl closed his eyes and took deep breaths to demonstrate the stillness. I could hear the silence of his empty house, penetrated only by the gentle breeze outside and a few distant cars. He let the silence sink in for a long moment.
With your mind clear and your body perfectly still, focus on the little white sparkling lights that start to form behind your eyelids.
Those crazy little lights aren't just part of my imagination?
Don't interrupt. Everyone can see those little bastards if they try. Anyway, focus on the lights. Push away all thoughts except one. As you fall back asleep, and you should quickly, count those fingers again. Theoretically, you'll be so tired and so focused, you'll transition into the lucid dreaming, counting your fingers. Once awake in that dream, don't blow it.
I nodded my head stoically. Okay, I'll do it. When you have a mentor like Carl, you obeyed.
Hand me that cane back, asked Carl, pointing with his chin. Enough talk. It's time to really work if we're going to keep up this charade with your parents. And don't forget, work is your payment.
How could I ever forget? Chapter 4. Doppelganger. The patriarchal line in my family was keen and discerning. My father was never so naive as to believe I enjoyed my second-class citizenship to Ray after all these years. Too many days I came home angry from school. Too many times my mother rehearsed Peter Pan or its equivalent in empty words of consolation. Too many days my parents found me alone, sulking over unnamed woes, and they knew, they always knew. I was to be perfect, or at least most nearly perfect. I had to compete against people given twice the day as I to think and study, but I was to overcome. I didn't truly resent them for failing to set me free. They had a purpose. Instead of challenging, instead of tackling the core issue, we recited the family motto as a form of indoctrination. Your father has a purpose. Apparently my father had a purpose. Carl seemed to think so, but I just failed to see how I fit into the unspoken plan. I might have learned if my father and I could actually communicate, but my father gloried in cryptic parables. These parables often had labyrinthian layers of meanings, sometimes contradictory, depending on his purpose in speaking and the intended lesson. A dead end in the road, a bitter day at school, or a change in the weather, and my father found a new way to apply his allegories. In this way, he only needed a few good parables to teach anything, or ensure no one understood his meaning. One of his favorites was the story of the matchmaker and her grim reaper doppelganger. A young man, pining for unknown love, crossed paths with a sorceress called the matchmaker. It was her gift to show love seekers an experience of their future love. The boy, believing in her talent, allowed himself to witness the magician's power. She showed him a time, several years thence, with his wife. Emotions of love and companionship flooded his heart, before the enchantment vanished. Emboldened by the clairvoyant visage, the boy dedicated the years into manhood looking for his soulmate. He had seen her, he would recognize her, and surely he would know the woman of the dream. Time crept forward, but still no soulmate. Then the man came upon the doppelganger, a woman of equal power, who could reveal the end of your love, be it in suffering or embrace, divorce or death. Despondent over years of not finding his lover, he succumbed to the temptress's spell and received a second vision. Absent were the feelings of the first dream. Emptiness and sorrow replaced the love. He saw his wife, up in years, die, mugged while strolling through a garden with him. The neighborhood garden was familiar. He had visited it many times since boyhood, always finding peace in the grand sycamores and running children. But this new vision poisoned his love for the place. I will never return, swore the man as he fled the doppelganger. His love would never die in that garden if he never ventured there again. Never again did this man visit his place of renewal. He found new quiet places to ponder the grim reaper's warning. Day after day the second dream ate his life until one day he died, never having found his love, never having sought another lover, never knowing that his soulmate discovered the serenity of that garden the same year he had abandoned it. She would frequent it often, but he would not come. She died there, but not until she had a wonderful life with another man who discovered her stunning presence in that very garden. My father recited this parable when at the age of 14 I pleaded to quit sleeping for Ray. I worked for Carl, I worked for Ray, and I was miserable, desperately in need of release. I didn't understand the meaning of the parable, believing the story was a contrived and ridiculous way to comfort his son. I later realized he meant for me to pursue the course of sleeping as good could still yet come. In the moment, the easy course is to give up, to view the unwanted fate and quit, thus missing the joy of life waiting inside the garden. I stayed with Ray then, but not because of this parable and not because of the plan. There was no plan then, at least not at first. I stayed because I had no choice. Satisfied I would play my part in the family tradition, my parents expected little out of my relationship with Ray. Tolerance, not friendship, met the terms of employment. They respected my patience, but knew I loathed the employer. Hence my parents were intensely suspicious of my blossoming relationship with the Matson clan at the age of 16. Carl Schleif's plan gave me hope, but I needed the relationship with Ray, the ability to be in the head of my enemy if I were going to change everything. I became arguably sycophantic in my efforts to ingratiate myself. I would be as close to Ray as possible without losing myself and falling for his magnetism, though I did love weekend rides in his Mustang. Ray got his friend back, at least on the surface, and I sealed the bond to break all bonds. Anger and frustration made sense to my mother. She could justify these emotions of mine and still attempt to comfort me while consenting to her husband's mandate that I keep sleeping. But my change to obsession unnerved her until she snapped. "What has changed, John? Why are you so infatuated with the Matsons?" she asked, intent on interrogation. She had trapped me in her car for this conversation, taking advantage of our time while the autopilot navigated our path. I should have known she had a planned conversation when she sat in the back, a cue for me to join her, and evidence she wanted to focus on me rather than the road. Before I could answer, she continued, "You don't have to stick with your father's fate. This is his sin, not yours." I made no response but a shrug. I felt teenagers are so fickle. Surely I could disguise my emotions as a new form of rebellion, not a sinister plot of revenge. The black sedan stopped at a red light, a death sentence for this conversation. She paid no attention to the road as her voice tightened. "I know you stopped liking Ray the moment you became his sleeper. I watched that transformation, and I understood it. I cried with you, knowing this plight was unfair, even if necessary. But this new you, your latest obsession, makes no sense. Explain yourself." She was not angry with me, only intensely concerned. She could comfort sadness and frustration. She could do nothing for a son lost to madness and revenge. "Nothing to explain. Sorry, Mom." "No, John. That's not good enough for my boy." Her finger waggled at me accusing, drawing me back from gazing out the window. "You spend your bits of free time with Ray, and we both know how much you treasure your free time." I shrugged in vain, still attempting to deflect this interview. "You now eagerly join our family dinners with them, and I've heard you talk about staying with him after high school. A choice I thought you would never pursue, family duty and all aside." I didn't think I really had a choice. We were accelerating again on our way to the store. Just a quick stop before she dropped me off at Ray's. I should not have asked for a ride today. If I stayed home all day, my mother worried. If I went to hang out with Ray, she worried. There was no winning. And now she was breaking me with miles to go. I would have to answer soon, truth or lie. Normally she relented, but something consumed her today. "Save the snarkiness for Carl. When I look at your face, don't you turn away when I'm talking. When I look at your face, I could tell you still resent Ray, even if we don't read Peter Pan anymore." I grimaced at the unwanted reminder of something so immature as the Peter panacea. She ignored my expression and continued, "You haven't changed so much in the last few years that I can't see the pain. What are you doing to him? What is your purpose?" She wasn't going to quit. I turned to face her straight on. Time to end this conversation. "Fine, you win, Mom. Maybe I'm taking a lesson from Ray. In his ridiculous quest for popularity, he can't cope with conflict or anger. If someone is upset with him, he spends more time with that person. What would kill an ordinary man, Ray inflicts upon himself, believing that, given enough time, he and his enemy will like each other. The great narcissist." Her face reproved me for the supposed cruelty. I hated arguments with my mother, a woman stuck trying so hard to love two very difficult men. But now emotion got me going, and momentum wouldn't let me pause. The car sped on, matching my crescendo. "Such an approach doesn't always work," I explained. "In fact, his failures are hilarious. But Ray persists. We need our time away from our enemies." "I need my time," I said, pointing to myself. "The time to heal. After fights, we all need some space. Not Ray. He goes back for another beating. Perhaps I'm following this example. This tenacity." She looked at me questioning, but interested. "It's no secret I dislike him. I won't lie to you, Mom. I lost my childhood to sleep. I lost my adolescence to sleep. On my current path, I'll lose my adulthood to sleep. And the recipient of my loss is Ray. He is the sole recipient, the taker of all that should be mine and mine alone. I have every reason to despise him and his family. But I am trying a new response." And here my ability to lie really strengthened. "I am spending more time with Ray that I might see the good in him and again be friends." This was a relatively honest motive. Friendship, even forced and artificial, ensured long-term employment and influence as the collegiate decision loomed. If I lost him, all these lucidity tricks would be worthless. As I finished, a frown formed on her face and she started to cry. I couldn't tell if the tears were for the pain I suffered or the monster I would become. I couldn't even tell if she believed me. Doubt crinkled her eyebrows. "John, give up this quest," she implored. "Pursue anything but sleep. Be anything but a sleeper. You've done your time. Now let it go. It's not too late. Pursue art, history, math, anything. But please don't commit your life to this quest of destruction. Don't follow your family's tragedy. There's so much you love. You have so much potential for anything you pursue. You don't have to be like your father." She wanted me to give up the absurd dedication to revenge or servitude or whatever mysterious motive, born of my insanity, now drove me. But tragedy is written in blood. Oedipus Rex could no more save his family than I could betray mine. I met her love with distraction. "We're here, Mom. You want me to run in?" I would shop for anything to escape. The conversation was over. The next drive to Ray's was slow and silent. When my father came home that night, she pleaded with him to intercede. From the other room I listened in silence. My father firmly ended the debate. "He is a man now. He has made his own decisions for more years than you know. He has slept for Ray longer than you and I could have forced him. He understands the parable of the matchmaker and has chosen to persist. There is something to be found in the garden. Let it go. Let him find it." I couldn't tell from my father's response if I had done his will or caused him grief, but I continued nonetheless. I stayed by Ray's side for the rest of high school, never begging my parents for separation and freedom. I kept my enemies closest. My mother quietly wished I would revert to the boy she understood. My father silently accepted my relationship. Whether out of support or independence, I didn't know.